Oh, wow. Good job.
We humans, like all other species, are naturally exploitive. Except that now we have the capabilities, the tools, the energy resources to dominate this planet. What is it about the way we have evolved to think and act that is shaping this world that we have so recently created? Mankind faces a challenge unlike any other in its history. And it's a problem that evolution did not equip us to solve. We are living in a momentous time, facing our most important test ever. Is it even reasonable to believe that we who created the problem in the first place might also be able to stop it? And if so, allow future generations to avoid a desperate and deadly world left to them by us?
Welcome, everybody. My name is John Zavalny, and I'll be your host today as we talk about an intriguing new documentary about climate change produced by Jim Swift and directed by Susan Kucera titled The 12th Hour. One of the things I found so intriguing about this documentary is the idea that our human evolutionary history may play a major role in how we think about and how we react to our warming planet. But before I introduce our guest and begin our conversation about the 12th hour, I'd like to share a little bit of my background. I retired after 30 years of teaching in Los Angeles Unified School District at the Fauché Learning Center, where I taught middle school science, high school biology, and environmental studies at both levels. My real passion is environmental education and helping inner-city students to understand and experience the natural world. My wife and I saw former Vice President Al Gore tape his slideshow, which later became The Inconvenient Truth. He announced he was going to train trainers to show his slideshow, and I applied and was accepted, and was trained in the third group ever in January 2007. I made it part of my job to provide climate education in as many classrooms and to as many students as possible, which made me one of the top presenters in the organization, which kind of leads me to why I'm here today. I work with Michael Cohert at the Video Project, helping to provide free environmental documentaries to schools. I provide educational components for films and in-classroom facilitation. I've already introduced several classrooms to the 12th hour. And in the 12th hour, we're seeing how this warming planet is having an impact, not only on humans, but on all living things. My guest is a man who lives and breathes to be one with nature. Not only that, he walks the walk and he talks the talk. It's my pleasure to introduce Darrell Hillaire. Darrell is a highly esteemed leader and executive director of the Tse-sum-ten and Setting Sun Productions. Darrell has served as a coach, mentor, leader for the Lummi Nation for over 20 years. He served on community boards on Indian Business Council and chair of the Lummi Nation. He founded the visionary Lummi Youth Academy in 2008. And in recent years, Darrell has discovered the power of writing and producing plays. Now his life has opened a whole new and unexpected act. Though he's still passionate about educating the youth, he has chosen an additional classroom, the stage. Welcome, Darrell. It's an honor and privilege to have you here today and share your knowledge and expertise.
Well, hi, John. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm really interested in making new friends and forming partnerships and alliances for this really important work that this film speaks to, and I think we all need to get behind this idea of creating unity around this purpose, to leave something that's really our children's inheritance, and that's where we begin in our thinking. We really fear for our children and their children's futures, so that's important to me that we get together.
Right. Well, we're both educators. I think we both have that same belief about the youth and what we need to do to help them for their future.
Right. It begins there.
Yeah, it does. So storytelling is one of the most ancient forms of communication, used to pass information and knowledge from one generation to the next. And you've become quite the storyteller. You've written several plays, one about the history of the Point Elliott Treaty of 1885, which I understand later you discovered another play was written in 1955 by your uncle about the same thing.
Right. It's actually 1855. The Point Elliott.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Point Elliott Treaty of 1855, where the Lummi people, as well as a number of other tribes, went to a place called Mukilteo to enter into a treaty with the United States government. And that treaty laid out certain requirements that we were to give up, what we felt was, our inherent rights to this place and how we lived and where we hunted and gathered, and all those things were compromised through the treaty with the idea that we would share this place with the newcomers. So the very fundamental understanding of that was that those people from the United States government will live up to their responsibilities to the document that they were signing to. And then my efforts today in the recent past, like 4 or 5 years ago, was to write about that and showcase the feelings of our people via a play to reach a new understanding of what it meant then and what it means today. That promises that were made should be kept and must be kept.
Right. You also wrote another play about the Washington Redskin football team.
Right.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I remember I was like you mentioned, I was on the council for the tribe, which is the governing body, and acting in that capacity. I was paying attention to this whole argument over mascots and what that meant to the people around the country and what it meant to me and to others, and I had this idea, well, hell, why don't we just buy the damn team, and the tribes have realized some great deal of resources now through tribal gaming and the casinos that sprung up all across the country. And we were to form a syndicate, we could actually buy the Redskins and change the name. So I wrote a spoof about that, and what about that idea and how would we go about doing it, and highlighted the very racial connotations of not only mascots but how we treat one another and the hierarchy in this community, in this country, and brought light to that from our perspective and poked fun at ourselves, but also all the other institutes that just kind of hop aboard on this. I don't know, just very, I think, uneducated and ignorant views of one another.
Right. So, well, they have finally changed their name. So you've got to be thrilled about that.
Well, yeah, it's a beginning. There's so much that needs to be told, in the genocide of our people through time. And that's not taught in the history books in our institutions.
Right.
That's never been used. But if you look at what's happened across this country and the degradation of the environment and the loss of our lifeway, and then the very deliberate effort to kill the Indian to save the man through the boarding schools that is really just coming out right now with the amount of kids who lost their lives by going away to an institute where they beat the language out of them, they cut their hair, and they took away their way of life, because that wasn't the way we need to be as a people in this country.
Right. Yeah, the cultural identity was taken away.
Right.
So you've been talking about this already, but tell us a little bit about the message that you're trying to send out with your plays and your audio recordings and everything else that you're doing.
Well, Children of the Setting Sun comes from my great-grandfather, who formed a dance group in 1900. He was actually at the treaty signing in 1855 as a young boy. And the old people at treaty signing told him and the other young kids that were at treaty sign to never forget, the words that are being said here, because, it's important for us to hold up our end of the deal, but it's also important for the other people to be reminded of their rights to live here, and under those rights, what are those responsibilities?
Right.
So as he grew older, then he realized that we were being flooded with newcomers. So he formed a dance group. He named it Children of the Setting Sun. So he took it upon himself to go around and educate people about who we are as a people, what we stood for, what our way of life was like. And through song and dance, he was able to create a connection and was able to educate people and form community with people. And so he did that all the way up until he passed away. And then he passed it on to his son, who continued that work as Children of the Setting Sun. And then when he passed on, all those grandkids picked it up and continued that work. So here I am as an elder now and looking at my responsibilities to the next generation. I named this company using today's medium, Children of the Setting Sun, to continue that legacy of my ancestors.
That's a really important legacy that you want to keep passing on. That's for sure.
Right.
So, how did you get involved with the 12th hour? And I know you've been in other things, but why the 12th hour? How did that happen?
Well, Susan Kuchera and Jim Swift became friends of mine in the trailer that we seen. They're the director and the producer of that film, and they contacted me and asked me to come on and to speak to, our views of what's happening in this world and share what we're doing as a company, but also as a people,
Right.
So that can add to whatever that idea of a movement or the needed transformation that must happen in this country in order for us to even, consider that we're going to be surviving as humanity, So that's why I'm here.
Right. So have you been involved with other climate change education or programs?
Well, not directly. We started out as Children of the Setting Sun Productions to create, educate, and share stories. As you're saying, the storytelling is a really effective way to get across a message to people. So we started doing that, and through stage productions and through books and short videos, we did that. And through that effort, we noticed what's going on in our community, the importance of salmon to our community, how our community acted, how our community felt when there were salmon in our waters here in our homeland, and everything's elevated, everything's brought to the attention of every family that our salmon are coming back, our ancient ancestors are with us, and it'll sustain us both physically and spiritually when we're connected with the water and salmon. So I took note of that and decided to make a film about that. And the Salmon People film is about the sockeye salmon returning to our homeland and what that means to us. And so through that, and then along comes COVID and things get shut down, and the next thing you know, all you're doing is reading and watching what other people are doing. And I took note of that, and up and down the Pacific coast, there were other tribal people announcing to the world that we're the Salmon People too. And so I said, well, I'm going to bring the Salmon People together. So we started doing that, and we had these virtual gatherings over the last few years where the Salmon People from Northern California on the south, all the way up into Canada and the Rockies, and the Salmon People that are at the headwaters of the Fraser and Adams River, and all those tribes in between, we came together and shared our stories. And through that, you realize the deep, deep connection to the water and to salmon and to all living things that are part of that life cycle of the salmon. So, right. Yeah, so this is our third year. We're going to meet in Oregon at a place called the Salado Falls Village, where we're going to have our third gathering, and we're going to meet in person this time, and we're going to have ceremony, and we're going to talk to the people and have them share their song and their stories, and bring that all together in a series of short films to share with other people. Out of that, I hope that people will realize that there's a set of values there that are worth understanding, and if they wish, even to learn. This whole idea of gratitude is where the fishers begin, the salmon people begin. They are continuously being thankful to what is being received from the salmon and from the rivers and from the ocean, and all those things along the way of the salmon's cycle of going out into the ocean and coming back and giving life and then dying, and all that happens after that cycle is completed.
Right.
So,
yeah. In the 12th hour, you say that we believe that nature will take care of itself. It always is creating, dissolving, and recreating. And it's us that hasn't got the message.
right.
What is that takeaway message that we're not getting?
Well, we're sure are taking very good. We're very greedy people, selfish people, apathetic. And what's the counter to that? Well, if we can learn how to share, I think that would be a really, really important step in towards solving some of our issues. If it's the accumulation of wealth just to have it, that's not going to work. It all ends up in one pile, and it's not cycled back into not only our lives, but the lives of all living things. And that's what's missing. That's this whole idea of sharing as the beginning point.
Right. That the common good kind of thing is something that we really have to work on. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what you find in the salmon people communities, is that's what they're all about. They recognize the life way of the salmon and how it's giving to us. Well, we're taught to give back through our life way.
Right. Yeah, I found another quote when I was looking through some of your articles and things about your organization, and the quote is, "Earth is sacred. She's suffering because of greed and ignorance," which we just were talking about. "And through storytelling, we share our indigenous values of gratitude, generosity, respect, and responsibility. When hearts and mind are one, we're able to learn and work together." Now, that is a great message. That's whoever wrote that was brilliant. That was wonderful.
Well, that's what we practice here at Lummi. But like I was saying, I found it very, I guess, inspiring and comforting that when I visit these tribes up and down the coast, that they're really embracing that very message. They live that message. There are what you would call poor people living on the river. I say poor because, they don't have the 3,000 square foot house. They don't have the 5 cars. But they do have a boat, they have a net, and they have salmon. And what they do with that salmon is they share it with the people that have nothing. And that's evident wherever we go and we collect these stories, that's the first inclination is to share with people and give it away.
So bringing all these tribes together, were there in the past maybe difficulties doing that? Maybe you didn't agree and there were wars or other thing, but is this something different that's happening now?
Well, we've got to recognize there is intertribal differences. There's a history of intertribal warfare, but at the end of the day, we seek peace, for our people, and I think nature and salmon dictated that we, in order to survive, in order to maintain our life way, we needed to set aside differences so that harvests could be shared and the people can learn from one another how weather and climate was always in the midst of change.
Okay. Now I think of documentaries as a form of storytelling. I mean, they get a message across, they have a story to tell. What do you think the message that the audience will get from the 12th hour?
Well, hopefully just that we need to get over the very the basic capitalist mindset of accumulation of wealth and selfishness just doesn't work. That we need to find another way of living together. And hopefully our contribution will lead towards that kind of change.
Okay. Yeah, I've always kind of thought of the indigenous peoples for being what I call the original environmentalists. They lived with the land, not against the land. Then they were very looking forward about how they're going to leave the land for their relatives and their future ancestors. My students were from the inner city. Now I heard it said that students like mine suffer from something called nature deficit disorder. They have no real connection to or understanding of the natural world. The only connection they seem to have is with their electronic devices. And do the students that you work with seem more disconnected from nature than prior generations? And if so, why do you think that is?
Well, it is quite startling. The next generation hadn't lived the life of my generation or my dad's or my grandparents, which was just a short time ago, where our people would be on the water and they'd be harvesting from, spring till late fall. And due to environmental degradation and due to climate change, due to all these different factors of development along the river and polluting of the ocean, last year we had 1 day of sockeye fishery. And the year before it was 0 days, which is, if my ancestors would wake up and see that, they would be probably quite either angry or quite depressed for the way our things have gone for our people, because they had a belief that, this would always be here. This would all be there. We will become from a land of abundance. This country is a land of abundance, So why do we have to continue to destroy it rather than uphold it, and save it for future generations?
Right. That's kind of part of the message of the movie, is that, especially in the Western societies, that we have abundance, but we waste so much. And I think that's part of the message that we need to get across to people, is like, really be thoughtful about what you're doing and what do you really need.
Right. And that's why we want to showcase some of these tribes and what they're doing, because it's all about community. It's all about what we can give, not what we can take. And hopefully that could get across to some people, especially the educators, towards how do we rethink this economic model, this societal model that we have, where it's always just the culture of marketing. Well, let's market something differently.
Yeah, the mass consumerism is what our economy is based on, and that's not sustainable.
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, I'm a trainer for the Climate Reality. I mean, not a trainer, but I'm a presenter for Climate Reality. I do a lot of climate presentations. And in this organization, we provide education through doing climate presentations and talks. But also, we're focusing on issues like environmental and social justice. Can you tell me a little bit about if and how those issues affect your communities?
Well, yeah, justice and, climate change, the people here in this country, they gave up certain rights to the United States and the citizens of this country under treaty, which is, we feel, the supreme law of the land. And in every instance, those treaty agreements have been violated. And that's a great injustice to the people that we felt were powerful people that would be people of their word. And so through that comes the disconnect from our natural environment. And from that disconnect, there came a whole heck of a lot of social problems, if you will, social challenges, if you will, that our people face from being removed from the water, being removed from the land, being placed in boarding school, having land taken, all of that. And then, people asking us, well, what's wrong with you? But they don't realize that, in this history of this relationship, that it was all, this agenda of greed and selfishness that overwhelmed not only our people, but, when we talk about slavery and the things of that nature, and other people that came here to work for those that were creating this empire, that there was tremendous injustices created over a long period of time.
No, I know you're an educator, and I heard a rumor that you won a very prestigious education award.
Probably not. It's probably gotten some local awards, but I credit to my teachers. I credit to the team. It's like we do this all together. I'm merely a spokesperson for our organization and the things that we do, and we work on vision with each other all the time and what we can do for our children.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't like those things called awards and putting one person above the others. That's not our way of thinking.
Yeah, well, that's not why we teach either, is it?
No, no.
The reward is the students, and when they come back to you and are successful in making a difference, that's the reward I want.
Well, I have to tell you, John, in my previous life, I started a dormitory called the Lummi Youth Academy because an elder noticed that in our community we had many children that needed a place to live so that they can learn some life skills and get their education. So I went to learn about that. It was because of the drug epidemic in this country. It affected our community tremendously. So I built a dormitory and I got to learn about the kids' lives over a period of 15 years. And today, all this time later, we've had 5 of those kids that were at the academy. They either work here or they work here currently, or they're on my board of directors. So it's I'm a wealthy
That's the
man.
reward, right?
Yeah, that's the reward. Yeah.
Now, you talked a little bit about the Salmon People Project, and I read where it stated that the series will be a call for a change and a plea to awaken the spirit of indigenous knowledge that lies somewhere deep within us all.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what that indigenous knowledge is?
Well, it's that connection. It's that connection. You were talking about the kids that are disconnected. There's folks that you talk to that are still have their boots in the water, still understand what the seasonal cycle, the life cycle of the salmon, and their own choice to live a life in a certain way that connects themselves to what's going on in the environment. Through that, it's like you could call it a spiritual awakening if you come from the outside and you see that take place, but they're just very connected yet. And it's kind of like we still have that that animate way of living, that everything has a spirit, everything has a life, and you can see it sometimes, you can feel it sometimes, you can, it comes to you at the most unexpected moment. This connection is made, and if you've had that experience, if you've been in the forest or you've been on the waters, it happens, and that's a blessing, I think, that we are connected. We just need to be able to release this kind of life that we're wrapped up in to reconnect.
Right. Yeah, I've been involved with Dr. Jane Goodall for the last 20, almost 25 years now in her programs, and I closed yesterday's interview with a quote that you almost just quoted exactly. It's about getting out in nature. I mean, if you've been alone in the nature and you've experienced it, you don't really need to say anything more, right? But getting out there and just being around nature and getting that calming and connecting is just so cleansing. It is.
Yeah, we need to really emphasize this in our curriculum. We need to really emphasize this in how we raise our children. I think that's where our hope lies, is what kind of life our children are going to live, and begin planting those seeds today.
Absolutely. The younger, the better, right? Got to get them early.
Right.
Okay. So, I'd like to think, we're having more of a conversation than an interview, and I've been asking all the questions. Is there anything you'd like to ask me about my career and what I've been doing?
Well, I think, John, I think if you have probably, you talked to Jane Goodall and the like, my question is, how do we create more unity with what we're doing here and what we're experiencing with the climate crisis? And, we need to wake up, I think, and how do we get ourselves in a position to create more unity, which is power, that we have more power and our voices are amplified. And today's technology creates an opportunity to do that, but then there's so much garbage there and the algorithms are set up in such a way that they're going to gravitate towards those things that are more controversial. But the ultimate controversy is just us as a people, and that need to learn compassion so that we'll give ourselves a chance, you know. So that's what I think is that's the ship, you know, this compassionate ship needs to turn so that we can face one another and begin to work together, you know. We have people that are waiting to learn, but then, you know, I need to figure out how we could get in front of those people or those people that are like-minded like yourself and I, so we could create a bigger movement.
Well, I think we both think that education is the answer to that question. I mean, that's what it's got to take. But also got to break down those walls of divisiveness. I mean, we're such a fractured country that, we can't get any people to agree on anything. But I think the youth, and when we teach the youth, I mean, that's a great beginning.
Right. Right. I know we're being very deliberate about here, you know, we put the youth in front as much as we can, you know, and we support them. We respect their voice. You know, if we any place that we might go and there's a lack of women's voice or a lack of youth voice on the program, the agenda, or the forum, we take a very deliberate effort to make sure that they're at the table, or we create our own inner circle where they are at the middle of the circle. At the
Right.
Salon Falls gathering, we're going to have a women's circle on the first day to hear from the women, because the women come with that responsibility. They are the water people, you know. Water is sacred because that's where we come from, is what is within the woman at birth, you know, and the miracle of life is from that sacred water.
Right. Okay. Now, we're almost out of time here, but I just want to ask you if you have any new other projects or initiatives that you'd like to spotlight today.
Well, you know, the Salmon People Project is really going to be our kind of our number one thing. We do a lot of land acknowledgements, people coming to us for that. We're working on the Canoe Journey series, which is, if you go to YouTube and you type in Canoe Journey, you'll see what we're up to. And the phenomena of canoes traveling from reservation to reservation resulted in like 118 canoes coming to Lummi in 2019. It was a huge potlatch. So we're going to begin filming that and what that means. But
Right.
most importantly, it's the Salmon People Project, where we're going to finish our feature film, do this series, do research. We're actually setting up an institute, Setting Sun Institute, where all of this indigenous knowledge will be housed and develop reports and analysis made for academia, as well as those tribes that need it to make their arguments, whether that be dam removal or river restoration or those things that are detrimental to the environment. We want to make this available to people so they can use that in their arguments.
Great. One final question. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is leadership. I look for leadership. I look for people like you. I look for the young people that have a voice, that are calling us out, you know. I look for leadership and the wisdom of our elders, you know. And when I feed off of that, that really gives me hope that, yeah, if we could just get this force of energy together and get that out to the people that are either not knowing or want to know, you know. We know we're up against people that are pretty much deniers and are going to not ever admit that we have a problem here. But there are a lot of people that are looking for leadership, you know. That's where I'm going.
Great. Well, Darrell, I just want to thank you again for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been a real pleasure. And I'd also like to thank the 12th Hour and Vanquish Media for putting this live stream together for us. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from my good friend, Dr. Jane Goodall. She says, quote, "Only if we understand will we care. Only if we care will we help. And only if we help shall all be saved." End quote.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. At Lummi and
I appreciate it. And I hope all you out there learned a little bit more about the climate crisis, and come back tomorrow to learn some more about the 12th Hour and climate crisis. My guest will be Dr. Michael Rainey, professor of cognitive psychology from the UC Berkeley. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.